Welcome back, everybody. We're here for another episode of the Hire Fire podcast brought to you by Pyra Consulting. Super excited for today. We have a pre-recorded interview with one of our favorite security people of all time. So we will introduce that shortly. And we got a couple of things we're going to go through first. In order to get there, we have a couple of segments to run you through, which I think you'll enjoy. A little staffing news and notes. Amanda, hi Amanda.
Hello.
Has a amazing fun story about what we call hashtag triggered. And then we're introducing a new segment, which I'm hoping to bring every episode, that we are tentatively calling things that make you go, which is really the most ridiculous, outlandish stories that we see in staffing. And today's does not disappoint. So we will get to that third just before we jump into the interview with Derek. So, how are you, by the way?
I'm fantastic.
Welcome back. No
Thank
idea what
you.
Episode number this is. Doesn't
Nope,
matter.
doesn't
really
matter.
matter. We're just going to continue to go. This is a part of our security-themed month, for lack of a better word. So this will be one of two different episodes we're shooting on that. And a couple of different interviews. At least that's the plan. So we'll see what happens. And today's is Derek, as I mentioned. So jumping into the staffing news and notes, this is basically just a bunch of stuff going on that anybody might care about in regards to hiring, firing, anything from wages to job openings to just ridiculousness in regards to actual news stories. So one of my favorites that blows my mind is an article that I saw. I guess it looks like Business Insider gets credit for this. So I know Amazon's huge, right? Clearly,
Yeah.
right? Jeff Bezos, poor guy, by the way.
Yeah,
poor
I
guy
know.
recently got booted to
got
a
booted.
lowly number 2.
Could you even imagine?
I know,
Like
just,
just,
he cares.
Just doesn't.
I mean, the guy lost like $60 billion or something in a divorce, and he just soaked it right up.
he
and
was
moved
like,
on.
okay.
Yeah. So, anyways, poor guy gets booted from the number 1, but his company evidently is doing just fine, as most of you know. I am definitely an Amazon fan.
Oh my gosh.
I know, right? Just ordering that stuff
Just-
constantly.
Just take my money.
So Amazon employs a whopping 950,000 workers. So there's a couple of stats in here that'll blow you away. Now, the one stat that I do know is 1 out of every 153 people employed in the country. So one out of every 153 people work for Amazon, which is insane.
Incredible.
So find 150 people in any setting that you're in, and statistically, one of them is an Amazon employee.
Correct.
This one will blow your mind even more. Oh my God, I can't believe I can say this. So Amazon, again, employs 950,000 workers, presumably globally, I would guess.
I would guess.
But check this out. That's below the 1.6 million people employed by who?
Oh.
Who do you think it is?
Employed. Okay.
So Amazon,
So there's
950,000
Amazon,
workers, and there's another employer that has
UPS.
1.6 million people. It is Walmart. Walmart has 1.6 million employees. That is insane.
With a quarter of them being the greeters.
Probably. So whatever the math is, if one out of every 153 is an Amazon employee, then
that
in the
math?
U.S. that is. So obviously it's probably, I'm just guessing based on ballparking the math here, it's probably more like 1 out of every 95 people work at a Walmart. Now, it doesn't...
Well, they're just so huge.
Right.
I mean,
So the stat is 1 out of every 153 in the U.S., but then it says Amazon employs 950,000, which it doesn't say whether that's just in the country or not, but insane.
yeah, it's a lot.
Right. The next
I
one...
wonder what level where the Walmart CEO or founder or whatever you want to call it, where they land in
The Waltons?
Okay,
So this is actually interesting. You should look this up if you don't know it, because there's like 5 or 6 of them on the top 20 richest people in the world. And I think a couple of the richest females in the world are Waltons as well, because they all kind of have different stock value based on like who are the kids and who married who and stuff like that.
well, they're not in the top 10.
No Walton is.
No.
Okay, got
it's
it.
Bezos, Musk, Arnault.
And he is now number 1. He's the founder and
Bernard.
owner of Louis Vuitton,
Vuitton.
which is even more ridiculous, but we won't go there.
Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, Warren Buffett, Larry Ellison and Larry Page.
And Ellison is Oracle. I don't remember who Page is, and someone's probably screaming at their like car radio or something, but maybe I should know that. Anyways, next article in the old staffing news and notes, which I found interesting. So this is a little insider shop because here at Pirate Consulting, we are an IT staffing firm, exclusively IT, that is. But we use different job boards on occasion. So some of our favorites are Indeed, Career Builder. You may or may not have a story about another job board in a moment to share on your end there, Amanda. Mm-hmm. So we use Career Builder. It's one of the sources that we'll use. From our perspective, it's nice because everybody's contact information is viewable, and unlike Indeed. So as an employer, when you reach out to somebody on Indeed, you don't get to see their contact info until they like approve of talking to you.
Sure.
So that's a selling point for the candidate, obviously, but a disincentive for an employer.
Okay.
However, Indeed's like the biggest. So if you want the most people, that's your
largest
go-to.
net.
Exactly.
Correct.
Largest net is well said. So one of them is Career Builder, though, and recently they have been a massive pain in the butt to work with, and they were down completely for like a week and a half. Several months ago, some of my employees and I were speculating that it had something to do with a hack. So ironically, we're on the old security topic.
Exactly.
I can't validate that. It was just clearly a technological problem. So it did make me laugh a little bit, which is obviously sad for the faithfully departed, but they replaced their CEO.
She's staying on as a what did you say?
Consultant. A moderately paid consultant.
Really, just this is where I saved this file. This is where this is.
Right. Well said. Yes. Novoselsky, I think I'm pronouncing that right, who was the CEO in 2017, will continue with the company as an advisor. But Susan Arthur is taking over the role. 30 years of experience, actually came from Optum, which is a division of United Health Group located here in these very twin cities that we are right now of Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota. She was the COO for its $10 billion technology and services. So obviously
incredible.
Cool for her.
Yeah.
She's held leadership roles
Great
at
career.
DXC Technology, not very familiar. HP, which I know well, and then EDS, which I know well as well.
So I wonder if Career Builder will make a comeback, because when I was in my 20s, not that long ago, let's pretend.
I suppose.
And that's where you went, was Career Builder. Monster was too national, so you really couldn't get like super local. And then now in the last how many years, it's been Indeed. So I'm curious if they'll make some kind of like push and come back.
Maybe. I mean, from my perspective, it tends to be the one that spends the most on advertising. Like Monster was huge. And then they just kind of dwindled. And then Indeed took over that role. And then another one like ZipRecruiter is trying. So we'll see if that comes up in a bit. A recent article, so according to, I'm not seeing, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics back on August 9th, job openings increased in June to set a record high for the third consecutive month as a recovering economy further pressures a tight labor market. Job openings were up by 590,000, which goes up to 10.1 million. That is the highest since records began in December of 2000. So we are, I don't know what the hell's going to happen with COVID, but the job market is hot.
Now was that for all jobs?
I believe that's the case. Yep. It doesn't say anything. It says it's seasonally adjusted. So they take out the part-timers. So that's basically any full-time positions, regardless of anything you do. It says the job openings were increased in a number of industries, led by 227,000 in quote-unquote professional and business services, 133,000 in retail trade, and 121,000 in accommodation and food services. So that's not surprising, right? Like the gas station down the dang road from me all of a sudden was closed the other night on third shift with a flippin' honest sign on the door that just said, "We don't have a third shifter."
Yeah.
So they just shut the doors and locked it.
You're seeing that more and more, where companies they're adjusting their hours, they're limiting their menus.
Totally using COVID for that.
But not always using. Sometimes they legit just don't have it.
That's true. I think
there's a combo.
The restaurant one pisses me off though, because I used to work in restaurants. So like outside of, I can get it if you got rid of a menu item that had like a one-off ingredient that didn't cross over to any other item, right? So the only flipping reason you have, first thought, green onions is for this, so you could be like, if we cut that from the menu, we never have to buy these again. But a lot of them feel like they're just shrinking it just for the sake of keeping food costs low, and then see if people start whining about it. I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know.
I just know that staffing in general is one of the biggest issues right now out there for especially the service industry. And
people like you and I, we're in the staffing business. So this is like when you buy a new car and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I had no idea there were that many Honda whatevers out there, because you see them everywhere. I forget there's a psychological term for that, but kind of in the recency bias category.
Recency, and then you kind of pay attention to what matters to you.
Right.
So if you're driving, like I drive a Dodge Durango, as soon as I bought them, I'm like, look at all these.
Now you see them everywhere.
Now I notice the Dodge taillights because they're distinctive. So now I'm like,
right.
Now I'm just noticing Dodges.
Right. So with that being said, we notice those things like the now hiring, and they're everywhere. If you're not paying attention to those, try it just for a day, just to look around and see how many flippin' we need people signs on everything from like the McDonald's drive-through the other day was pimping it hard. Signs on the menu, the front sign, where they put the little letters, manually. So
they even have it where it's quick apply, like literally take a picture of this, let us know you're interested, and we'll call you.
Totally.
Like to the point where
they're
like,
start tomorrow?
Yeah, like I don't need a resume, don't fill out this form.
Do you have a face?
Text me that you want to work, and then show up.
Literally.
Like
we'll
if you need a job,
if you need a job, don't show up, that's
there are jobs.
Absolutely.
You want a job in a specific company, go in. They're hiring.
Oh, yeah.
They're hiring.
Absolutely. So the next article is similar, just talks about temporary help, which is related to us and what we do because of a lot of our business being contract-based. Now, in IT, that's a lot of like a contract a lot of times just means project-based. But nonetheless, it says temporary help services jobs rose by more than 9,700 jobs in July alone, up to 2.69 million, according to, again, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Talks about the temporary penetration rate edged down a little bit, which I'm not sure what that means. Sounds a little risque.
It does.
If your mind's a little dark or sick like mine is. Anyways, apparently temp jobs are up. U.S. job openings are at an all-time high, apparently for the third month in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
well, I mean, they're not filling them. So there's also like it kind of keeps stacking.
Right.
But at some point, it's going to stall because we're not filling any. So you just kind of go, okay.
Yes.
Like we can't grow. So we can't post any more than what we've got.
Yes.
Similar
vein, if we continue on the unemployment type stuff, specifically IT employment reached a new high in June. So it says the rate of the growth continues to slow, which is interesting, but I guess that's just kind of hey, we're already at a high.
Right.
It says the organization found, which was TechServe Alliance, if that matters to you, the organization found the number of tech employees in the U.S. rose by about, like 0.25%. So it just means that literally there are continuing to be more jobs, net more jobs in IT. It went up by 10,000 jobs to more than 5.36 million. And then it says IT employment, just in general, rose for the 11th consecutive month, reaching a new high. So and the article goes on to talk about like a deceleration, but that makes sense, right? Like if you're trying, you can't grow it. You can't continue to hit new highs for 11 months in a row while increasing the rate of growth. That would be borderline almost impossible.
Correct.
But nonetheless, IT employment continues to be hot. Not shocking, but validating a lot of things. Real quick on that, in our meeting this morning, we were talking about pay rates, and a lot of people don't know this. Pay rates tend to be a super late lagging indicator. So COVID, for example, was not even long enough to get pay rates to come down, if that makes sense. So during a quote unquote recession. Now we're in a spot where it's really, really hot, but it'll probably take months and months still to get rates to get up consistently. It's literally we have to pay for talent.
Well, that's just it. So if they continue to have this massive gap in talent, basically, I have open jobs and who's applying and is qualified, basically, and fits. And then, they're really competing for these people. Well, at some point, when they get tired of losing to other people paying more, you have to pay more. So that, right? Like, I mean, that's how I envision it. Of like, okay, we keep losing.
Yeah.
We're going to have to increase our pay.
Yeah.
Or benefits or something. Whatever it is to hook someone.
And that doesn't even factor in the stuff we've talked about in previous shows about work from home and what the heck's going to happen there. Because now we're hearing clients more and more and more, small, medium, and very large businesses, because we have companies like Target, Best Buy, 3M, et cetera, headquartered here in town. They had the tentative plan, kind of that September, and most of them seem to be kicking the can to the end of the year.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens there.
Yep.
Last but not least, just a general thing about how workers feel. Workers feel that their careers have stalled during the pandemic. It says a majority of workers, and this is an understatement, 88% think so. 79% feel pressure to push their careers further as it's ending. In addition, this is sad, 80% do not think their current employer offers growth opportunities. So that's yuck.
Well, here's the thing. We are in the middle of kind of this mess. Like, no, the majority of companies in general are not growing and advancing. So maybe your career isn't going to either. Like,
okay, so
let's stay employed. Yeah. Let's all survive a little. Like
a little bit of domino effect there.
Right. Yeah. Like, no, is anyone just climbing the corporate ladder right now? Maybe, but like the shortage of people, I don't know.
So other quick stats, because everybody loves getting bored with numbers. 54% fear they do not have the skills needed to succeed in the new normal, quote unquote. 63% worry that hybrid work environments will slow their career growth. That's a really interesting one, right? My brother and I were talking about this the other day, because he works for Comcast at the corporate office in Denver, and he's pretty high up and does a lot for them on internal policies and whatnot. And he was talking about how much he loves working remote, but he mentioned one of the things is like, you kind of miss out on that camaraderie.
Correct.
So I could see companies...
The cooler talk...
Totally.
Even just catching your boss or supervisor in the hall and being like, hey, want to, bend your ear for a second, or I have a question, and then it's more personable. You're right there. You don't get to be involved in those things when you're remote. So you don't get to, short of scheduling something with your boss and be like, here's all the great stuff I did. You don't get on any of that like other stuff.
Yeah. And then nowadays, especially with bigger organizations, you got to be plugged in online and they can see, depending upon whether you're there. So, they're not that you need to work more hours to be valued, of course, but there is something to be said about, you're there, you beat your boss there every day, so your boss notices that you're an early arrival or you stay late or whatever. How easy is it to make yourself look like you're paying attention on a laptop and, you're playing Xbox or something, you know what I mean? So, not that anybody would ever do that. It's very irresponsible. I can't believe I ever brought that up. So let's see here. Career. Most workers define career growth through a salary increase, 77%. So that's not promotion. Promotion is actually a little less. It's 72%. So not shocking. How do you grow your career? Either get more money or get promoted.
Yep.
So
to circle back to what we talked about, the Waltons are number 16, 17, and 18.
Good job, Walmart.
In the richest.
Big fan of Sam's Club. Not as much a fan of Walmart, personally. I think for me, though, it depends on proximity. Like the city I used to live in, Walmart, mile down the road, there all the time.
Yep.
And then now I just have a Target closer to me.
Right.
So that's kind of what matters there. So there's your old staffing news and notes. I hope you learned something. There is no quiz. So if you were taking notes, then I don't know what you're going to do with that. Yeah. So next up is Amanda, gladly taking over our hashtag triggered section.
Yes.
So fire
little back.
Fire away.
So for those that aren't aware, I'm the director of marketing here, and so I do a lot of testing and of applying for the job, so that when you want to apply to one of the jobs we have posted, we know we get the application, that everything's working and great. So I was doing this recently, and we were trying to figure out something. So I had to go to ZipRecruiter, find one of our jobs, and pretend to be an applicant.
Right.
So I did that. Got the information that I needed, so that was great. The part that was interesting were the days following that. Of now I'm in ZipRecruiter, right? So now they know who I am, and I start getting emails.
Yeah.
Lots of emails.
Yeah.
Lots of very generic
Gmail inbox flooded.
Correct. So one of the things that ZipRecruiter does is, and they do name it an AI recruiter, so artificial intelligence recruiter.
And that's what the commercials are pimping too, right?
Yep.
Like, even to the employer, we will entice people to apply to your posting.
Correct.
And this is what you personally experienced.
So what I experienced was, please don't buy into this hype, because when I do these tests, I'll give, for example, I just literally put in my name, obviously my email address, but then test and a blank sheet of paper for the resume requirement, just so it passes, right? So it goes through. Well, according to Phil at ZipRecruiter, my AI recruiter, he has a name. It's Phil.
It is Phil.
Because we fill jobs.
Oh, shut the hell up. That's terrible. All right, go ahead. I'm listening.
So Phil at ZipRecruiter told me that based on my resume, which was a blank sheet of paper.
Somebody at ZipRecruiter was really, really proud of themselves for coming up with that. But go ahead. You're on ZipRecruiter. I apologize for interrupting you.
Based on my resume that I submitted, here were jobs that they recommended for me. And just one after another. I get, 4 emails a day about right now.
Okay.
That are, here's a new job. Here's what you need to do. Here's some advice. How likely are you to use us? Just inundated.
Unemployed 4 emails is not too bad.
No, but here's what people don't understand is when you apply to these places and you're not using a human, which is okay. I mean, there's job boards, there's a reason for some of this stuff, right? But when you use this and you use it solely, no one's actually looking at your resume and connecting you to these jobs. You get put into kind of what's called a drip campaign, an email marketing drip campaign, where, all right, this person applied for a job. I now have 47 emails over the next 4 weeks or 3 weeks that you're going to get that, insert your name, insert job title you applied for, and then using our AI, our algorithm, we're going to recommend similar named jobs in your area, whatever.
I gotcha.
So I find this very annoying because I didn't apply. I applied, but it's blank. So my hashtag triggered, I guess, is this is obnoxious to me, and no one looked at it. Use a recruiter.
Yes.
Use a recruiter. This is not this is not going to help me get a job. Even if I did put on my actual resume, this isn't helpful. It's all just generic BS.
Yes.
To be honest.
Yes.
So I'd rather have someone help me with my career.
Right. Now, obviously, we're never going to get paid ads by ZipRecruiter after this entire segment, which, it is what it is. But, in theory, there might be ways to go in there to really tailor it, but you just walked in and followed the process.
Correct.
An analogy for me is I got an insurance quote by a company to remain nameless, and I followed the standard procedure, and it was a really good quote, but I looked at what was covered, and I'm like, what? You know what I mean?
My God.
If I bumped into another car, it'll cover
screwed.
$138, right? So I had to manually go in there and change it, which is a little misleading on the old "we got you covered, follow our process" stuff.
But I come from the insurance industry in my 20s, and that was what we had to battle with all the time, where people are like, well, I can get insurance for $20 a month, and I was like, yeah, but you're covered for a scratch,
right?
You were covered for nothing.
Yeah.
Liability, like you're screwed. If anything happens, you saved what, $40 a month, but you now owe $500,000 in liability.
Right.
Like, good
That's
job.
terrible. That's terrible. So you have a 2 enthusiastic thumbs down on your set experience with ZipRecruiter thus far.
So far.
Well, we in the industry here, obviously, we're jaded, right? That goes without saying because we are a staffing organization. But we've seen job boards try and, let's just say, eliminate us.
Yeah, to mimic your skills.
It's just not really possible.
No.
And what people hate about recruiters half the time is the same shit, which is like, I'm getting the most irrelevant jobs sent to me.
Right.
So neither one are perfect. But talking to an individual that actually knows what they're doing, that has a specialty in your area, right? Like if you need a high-end finance job, we're not the company for you.
Correct.
Right? I could give you an opinion on ones that I like in town that I've heard good things about. But if you want to talk about IT staffing, especially in this market, we can give you anything you're looking for. But that's because you're telling us in advance what you want and we know what we're doing. It's tough to automate that.
It is, because some of the conversations, just talking about, the culture that you're looking for, or the specific area or commute length, or, that tailored, it's one of the reasons why, I kind of liked what Pyro was doing and kind of interested me in coming here, is that, it wasn't the young kind of recruiters just kind of reaching out of like, I have an engineering role. So if you are a software engineer, you can do engineering, right?
Ish?
No.
Yeah, I mean, engineering can be used in a lot of different ways.
And that's some of the stuff that I see in these emails that are coming in. It's literally just keyword searches. So there's a mix of, okay, well, that one's relevant, but that other one is not.
Right, exactly. So, again, no one's perfect. We're not faulting job boards for making the attempt because it's legit, right? If we can use technology to do it, we've just been watching this for, God bless it, the internet's really only mainstream for what would we call it, 25 years at best, kind of mid-90s. So we've been seeing companies do it for a solid 2 decades, and they're not bad. It's just really tough to fully automate that process that you can lean on and either not be annoyed or feel like it's a waste of your time.
Well, you kind of need the combo, I feel like, because if you go honestly, if you just go with recruiters, like we have obviously relationships with companies, but we don't have a relationship with all the companies.
Yes.
No one does. So that's where the combo of like, well, some stuff I'm going to have to market myself and go do the work and get all these emails and sift through them. Like, that's my cross to bear as a applier, as a candidate.
Evidently.
But I'm going to also pair that with a recruiter that can actually give me that personalized experience.
So last but not least, before we jump into this interview, is a new segment. We're workshopping the title, but it's too fun to pass up. So this one is things that make you go, which is basically just something that blows our mind inside of the staffing business. And here, a lot of times it's emails, it's stories of just what we deal with every day. So speaking of job boards, this one came via Indeed. So, we have recruiters that are reaching out to job seekers on Indeed. When they reply negatively, meaning they're not interested in what we're proposing, we get a decline notification. It's very generic, and that's about it. When we get a affirmative, like they would like to hear more, whether it be this job or anything else, we'll get a similar email that now shares that job seeker's contact info with us. This one blew my socks off. So one of our recruiters reached out to an individual having to do with a developer, software engineer role here in town. I don't know what happened. I don't know if this person accidentally did this. I don't know if they hit copy paste somehow. I don't know what happened.
Right.
But I get an email titled, this is from Indeed, but it was clearly re-forwarded, titled, shove it up your ass, mother fakers. Okay. So I see this on my phone first, and I'm thinking to myself, what is this, right?
Yeah.
Shove it up your
Do we have
ass,
an
mother fakers.
Angry candidate,
Correct.
client.
What the hell just happened?
What happened?
So I open it up and I'm like, oh, this is an Indeed thing, which clearly it came from Indeed, but it looks like it was kind of re-forwarded. And obviously I won't put this person's actual contact info on the air here, but the remainder of the email is just as fun. Quote, this is to us, mind you, as an employer. Remove us from your mailing systems. Islam doesn't condone working with wickets and criminals unless you repent and submit to Islamic law and hand over your masters to be prosecuted based on severe Islamic laws. Until then, you have to eat what you used to. Amen. And then it has the affectionate sent from my iPhone. So, I mean, this individual, let's give the guy the benefit of the doubt. This was accidental. Because it's so out of context, it makes no sense.
Say like
the job, his contact information is available. Like we can see it, right? So that means this person replied with a thumbs up, we'd like to talk to you, and then changed the subject somehow and put that note in there. One of my favorites, but shove it up your ass, mother fakers, is going to continue to be saved in my LOL folder of emails that I will covet for the rest of my professional life. Because why the hell wouldn't I? I mean, what is the deal? So, anywho, so those are our 3 segments. Something else popped into my head. We're going to try and do our best to give a timeline breakdown in the show notes wherever you're listening to this, right? So if it's a YouTube thing, a iTunes thing, podcast apps like Stitcher, what have you. So if you really can't stand us, but you would like to be able to skip to our interviews, which you provide value, you may do so, and we will give you the timestamp as to how to cheat to do that.
That is correct. I've done it for the last 2.
And I personally do that with other shows. So, people like different stuff. So that's just a heads up. So what we're going to do now is jump over to our interview with Derek. We had it pre-recorded, so we'll kick into that right now. All right, everybody, welcome back. Hire and Fire. We have a special guest episode on our security-related show today because Amanda and I are shockingly not security experts.
Correct. So
we're going to have an interview with our special guest, and then we're going to play a little game later on, which will be super fun. And our special guest today is Mr. Derek White. Hello. How are you?
Thank you. Good.
Yeah.
Mr.
Doctor? Professional. No, not a doctor.
Not doctor.
So Amanda's going to give us a little bit of a spiel about who the heck Derek is.
Yeah. Derek. So Derek is the co-founder and partner and director of business development over at Beryllium InfoSec Collaborative, located here in Minneapolis. And this has been going on for how many years, Derek? When did you guys start?
Officially, our Beryllium brand is just over 3 years old, but we were all kind of together doing the same thing under a different name for a year prior to that.
Okay.
Awesome. Congrats on that, seriously.
Thank you. It's awesome.
The information and cyber security firm. So that's fitting for us.
Darn right it is.
Third party, this is the episode where we wanted to talk to someone from a kind of a third party company to give us kind of that perspective versus, the flip side being someone who's in-house.
Yes.
Which we will get to on a different episode.
But which is awesome, though, because you not only are knee-deep in this world, but also you are supporting external clients. So the amount of variety of stuff you see must be insane.
It is. It borderline makes you paranoid as an individual who hears the stories. But there's so much going on, and it's just the fact of the nature is who we are as human beings and how we were brought up and raised on this stuff that it gets to be a lot, but it's good. It's opportunity means we can fix.
Exactly. So shameless plug for you that I'm teeing up. So help us understand a little bit about kind of what your guys' core is, specific types of customers, just so that we and the listeners understand kind of how and why you guys do what you do and what specialties you may have.
Sure. Yeah. So Beryllium is and we say information and cybersecurity is 2 different terms because cyber labels things as very technical, which is not really the case. But for the sake of today, we'll just use cybersecurity because it's easier to say. So we are a consulting firm first and foremost. So we spend a lot of time with government contractors, specifically the Department of Defense. So the defense supply chain, which is a massive situation right now. But all across federal government contracting, it's our supply chain, it's our core of our country, kind of a thing. So we do a lot of advisory, a lot of assessments, a lot of recommendations, and getting into the weeds on it doesn't matter if it's Amanda or Jeremy. What do they have access to things they shouldn't? Do they have access to things they should? And what should they do with it? So we do a lot of that. Healthcare, banking, credit card information, all that kind of stuff that's been more regulated for years. Do some of that, but we're very much focused on getting stuff in place and not just telling people how bad the future looks for them and then bouncing and collecting a lot of money on it.
Would you say generically, mostly it's in the governance, risk, and compliance area?
Yeah. So big time National Institute of Standards and Technology, so NIST.
Yeah.
If you have any kind of inkling on security compliance frameworks and stuff, NIST is the driver, NIST is the Bible.
Yes.
So we are big NIST experts, and you can map pretty much anything back to that. And if you can map back what you're trying to achieve and why you're doing it, you're going to be in a hell of a lot better space than somebody who's just swinging swords around and trying to, cut down whatever they can.
Work in either IAM or TVM as well. Identity and access and or threat and vulnerability is what I'm referring to.
So we work with a lot of partners that are very much SMEs in that space, so that we can keep our kind of third-party advisory role in place on that kind of stuff, because that can be a very heavy lift for a lot of people. And it depends on what you're going to do with it. So, yes, we have all sorts of technical partners versus, some more off-the-shelf things.
Yes,
and then some people have a very unique offering where, depending on how that gets deployed, things like multi-factor authentication can be super simple but very complicated for some. So, just depends.
Yeah.
So we don't ever get into the situation where we tell you how bad something is and then, oh, by the way, we're going to fix it for you too.
Right.
It's a really bad... That's called separation of duties in the industry for a reason.
Understood.
From the IT world, we know why that's important. So
I'd like to officially thank you for single sign-on. It's been a life changer in my career.
I came up with that idea in college after going to a hockey game, and I was like, it would be really cool.
I can't remember my passwords, and I'm sick and tired of calling the help desk to do fixes for me. All right, cool. Mm-hmm. Well, awesome. No, super happy to have you and to plug your firm, which is awesome, especially being a few years in. You guys clearly have your roots in the ground, and you got some wind under the wings per se, and obviously I understand what it's like to get something going, so congrats on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Obviously you fought through COVID. Hopefully the governmental contract thing was a saver there in regards to some long-term agreements, I'm hoping, for your sake. But so Amanda and we could anecdotally talk about this stuff because this is what we do in regards to staffing, but this is not what we do all day, right? So we need somebody who understands the nitty-gritty.
The only part that we can really come at it from, at least for me personally, was at my previous job, we weren't very secure, and we had an internal employee kind of identify that. And it was kind of this moment of like, well, where do we start? Mm-hmm. You get kind of overwhelmed of like, okay, but everyone's passwords are like on sticky notes and no one's in a central, like.
Well, what day is it today? July 7th. So a lot of passwords just changed to summer 2021, exclamation point, capital S.
That's
capital
right.
S. You have to have that capital S.
And then it'll change in 3 months.
Sometimes I like to throw them with one exclamation or three. Ooh. It depends, right?
Or a dollar sign.
Dollar sign is a little intense, right? I didn't really go down that road.
It's an extra couple of letters over. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's a common problem.
Right. And then obviously just security in general is one of the best places to be. I mean, from our perspective, it's basically recession proof from a skill set point of view. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of companies, I don't know if this is fair to say, but I think it's accurate, that are kind of running scared. You got the Target thing from a couple years ago. You got the FedEx dropping boxes of employee data and stuff out of the back of trucks.
Well, and with COVID, everyone went home, right?
Yeah.
And so what a mess that was of like, okay, now we have people who have, maybe they've never worked at home, because I have before and using VPNs. But like, for companies who've never done it, and especially if they have personal like data, how do you control that? That kind of got thrust upon them.
Right.
Yeah.
And I haven't done a VPN connection in a while, truthfully, because all I need in any job that I've had for years has just been web-based apps, right? So just log in and you're good. But if you need access to drives or data or whatnot, a lot of those VPN connections are a big deal, which, and then the building that I live in, I mean, the amount of furniture being delivered during COVID for people setting up shop was ridiculous.
Well, you couldn't get a monitor, you couldn't get a camera.
Right.
Oh,
and so I can't
goodness.
imagine what your run-of-the-mill IT department was dealing with in regards to that many users trying to connect remotely, which I don't really know. I mean, I don't know if this is your expertise or not, so forgive me if I'm like painting you into a corner, but is there a bandwidth related problem in regards to VPN connections as opposed to being hardwired in from the office, or not really?
Oh yeah,
there is.
To run a VPN, a private connection to a network somewhere else, it needs to have oftentimes more than just a weak signal is not going to work. So that's one of the things that we do anytime someone's building out some sort of a solution for remote workers or other facilities, right, is you have to have a secure internet. So I shouldn't say secure, a strong internet connection. Yeah. Because it has to run. So a lot of people did run into that, including my house.
Speed issues.
Yep.
Yeah.
So like a mesh network, for example, in a house where you're not just sending a signal like the old days where it's from the same spot all the way upstairs across multiple floors. Now you've got kids at home. You've got people working from home running multiple VPNs back.
Well, plus the kids are home and they're probably gaming and they're on watching Netflix. So like
disruption.
You're also battling with that.
So how about the company itself, them running their network? Is there a challenge having that many people remote just connecting, or is it a non-issue? I just don't know.
Well, there's challenges. There's a
plural.
A lot.
Sure.
Yeah. So we've been saying this since COVID started, was coming out of it. Let's just assume that we are coming out of it, right? There are a lot of IT professionals and security professionals that are either going to be making a lot more when they're done with this because of how valuable they were, or they're going to be exposed because they were just keeping the lights on, if you will, on the computers, right? Because, as you mentioned, security is... IT, I should say. I shouldn't even say security, but if my computer comes on and I don't have any problems, my IT person's doing their job.
Right.
This is great.
Yeah, nobody ever calls the help desk to say thank you.
Until it's too late.
Everything is working very well. I appreciate it.
And then when you do call to help them, they say, I don't want to do that. It's
correct.
Stupid.
Yeah.
So with remote working, that whole push brought all sorts of challenges, especially if, a lot of, as you guys know, a lot of IT resources are very thinned out at companies. You don't you don't just get 10 people just to join your team and let's go. It's usually one or two or maybe a few more. Yeah. And that person to be in charge of deploying VPNs to every device, and are they work issue devices or are they personal devices? I mean, there's a lot of I would call it transition risk from the company to now we're on home networks and people are at Caribou's because maybe people work in an apartment, which can you imagine being in a condo during that?
Yeah.
So there's a
lot. For those
of
you who aren't in the Midwest, Caribou is the better version of Starbucks, right?
Ooh, those are fighting words.
I really believe that. I know the coffee and the food's better.
I did hear somebody
triggered. I know.
Oh, I did have somebody in Virginia 2 weeks ago when I was out there say that they prefer Caribou over Starbucks.
Darn right,
just about ran because I was like, this is it. They're a spy.
Yeah.
Something's wrong.
No,
and that's me too. I'm weird. I get that.
I like. I'm a Caribou person.
Oh hell yeah!
2-on-1 here.
I know. Mm-hmm. That tees us up for a little game later.
Cool.
No, that is not one of the questions. No, so that's great. I mean, so from a skill set perspective, security, Java, cloud DevOps are about like the three most in demand. Mm-hmm. The biggest problem is outside of being a user administrator, it's tough to get anywhere without just getting the experience. We have a little bit of a chicken and egg scenario. So to make up a hypothetical situation, if someone's listening, they're desktop support, Windows, Linux, sysadmin person, and they have the pedigree to move into this area, right? Just I think most would have come from an infrastructure background. Like, how do you gain that? Do you volunteer? Are there certs that are automatically worth the money?
So you hit on a very big point there. Infrastructure is massive. If you are in or going into the security world, having an infrastructure background is a very hard thing to find most of the time because good infrastructure, it's all about control. That's our big thing. Control, right? It's data. So data is worth more than oil now. So it is the most valuable asset there is. That's why it's as big of a news story as it always is. Right. So when it comes down to protecting something, whether it's data or your kids or your car, doesn't matter. You have to figure out the risks, right? So with data, if you understand good infrastructure and what that means, then you can start using a more risk-based approach, if you will, to why is my company needed to go this route versus that route. The problem becomes we get the polar opposites we get a lot of security people who are very advisory driven, which is fine. Separation of duties is the biggest thing you can have in security and IT, where they're not the same role.
Kind of analyst versus engineer.
We don't want to have, exactly, you don't want to have the person who says, I just built the most secure network in the world and it's compliant with NIST framework X because I said so. Right? Because what's everybody going to say in a boardroom if Jeremy walks in and says that? They're going to be like, sweet. You should probably give that guy a raise. And then you don't ever want to admit that maybe you missed something because they're going to be like, oh.
Now it's on you.
So that's why our companies exist, like ours, where we can be an independent party who doesn't manage and do that. But infrastructure background, getting that into security comes down to being able to do creative and affordable, cost-effective things to make information stay where it should be. You mentioned access control kind of stuff before. Getting in and understanding how technology works, but also how process works and documentation of, when we were having happy hour, Amanda and I, it was kind of like, well, if Amanda was in charge of everything from a security perspective or IT perspective, one of the two, at a company, and I don't like to use getting hit by a bus because that's very sad, but like wins a lottery and takes off and moves to Guam or something. I like
hit by a bus personally, but it's a better image, right?
Okay, yeah, hit by a bus.
Right. She's not coming back.
Gets a lawsuit out of it, then moves to Guam.
Right.
Win the lottery. It's probably more realistic. But
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica, whatever. Pick your poison. So then that becomes a problem for a lot of companies because the IT person or the security person, even if you're fortunate to have both, one of those people leaves and there's no communication between C-level and throughout the organization and departments. Your host. Imagine what happens if an IT person left a week before everybody went home for COVID.
Right.
I mean, it was bad. We have people that work for the big prime contractors, Boeing, Raytheon, General Dynamics, right?
Exactly.
Some of the biggest companies in the world have not that many people. You'd be surprised that their job for 3 months was to get everybody home working on a VPN back into their networks.
Right.
Now imagine being a small company where you have one person doing it. It's just so to get into security stuff comes down. There are definitely security level certifications like CISSP stuff,
which is a little higher. So I view the lowest as like the security plus.
Yep,
being
security
CompTIA,
plus, and getting some of that through that stuff makes it more digestible. I guess I don't have those myself. That's not my background. So that's the people that we hire do. And,
exactly.
But you can overload yourself on one side of that too, where you can go through a ton of stuff and be very technical, and that's great. But that can be problematic when it comes down to documenting and showing and proving that you do have stuff in place, because from a security standpoint, the biggest thing in the news now is breaches, right? We don't hear about security being a problem until it's too late.
Correct.
That's just how it works. It's like a lot of regulations.
Correct.
Well, was it a bad problem, or was it a bad problem because they didn't know what to do or they didn't have processes documented, and poor person who had all of the stuff in place they could with the resources they had?
Right.
Not understanding that side of it becomes a very big challenge, and that's why.
So if we get down to brass tacks, we should blame China for pretty much all of this, correct?
This one's Russia. A lot of Russia.
We don't really know who, but there's no question. So getting into our wheelhouse, we're all about the national defense of our country that's our mission, because we work with a lot of small to medium-sized businesses that are never going to be able to get this stuff done for 142 different reasons.
Yeah.
They are the easy targets. But that's the case for healthcare. That's the case for banking. But you think about banking; they've had fraud regulation stuff for years. Around your credit card goes missing, you have a new one in 2 minutes.
Right.
Healthcare information, it happens. It's valuable, and it is, and people don't realize how valuable that is. But they have regulations around HIPAA and stuff that makes it harder. With more, we'll call them. I don't want to call them. More. Standard companies that they come to work, they do
just
their job,
Fortune
they
500
make
world, or
like just the small bit, the innovation of the supply chain of any business, of any infrastructure that we have comes from small businesses. It just does, because they have the drive, the need, they want, right? They don't have a luxury of being a Raytheon sitting at home.
Of course not.
So they want to be different. They want to show their value, and that's how they get their contracts. And so they come to, they're not focused on security and IT stuff, but China, Russia, and others know that. So rather than, the hoodie and the hacker in the hoodie in the dark room, that's not what it looks like. There's towers of companies in cubicles. Like our office is here. hacking into stuff, getting in. And are they going to? Does it make more sense to go after Boeing and try to get into their systems,
find
or
is
it easier to get to a smaller company or mid-sized company who's not paying attention?
They're not paying attention. They're big enough that they have the resources that they can either, ransom.
Yeah. So this is a perfect thing that I want to make sure we talk about, is that when this ransomware stuff happens, which is in the news right now, to the point where we have an executive order and stuff, finally getting to the point where it needs to start to be, everyone says to the people in our industry, "Oh, this has got to be great for you." It's like, well, it's part of it, but a ransomware attack is made to be loud. Like, you're screwed. It literally comes up and says, "You're screwed. Pay us some money."
Correct.
Or we're going to take a shit.
Right.
And so, okay.
Right.
So that's one kind of attack that people, then all of a sudden, the alarms go off. People start saying, "Oh, we got to prepare for that, ransomware prevention." And
then they're not paying attention.
They're not paying attention to intellectual property theft and things that are, I don't care what company you are, you do not want your company secret sauce. Right. You don't want your employee information just being exposed. You don't want your customer information being exposed.
Right, contracts, anything.
Public, private companies, doesn't matter. Well, those attacks are the ones where there's teams of hacking groups in nation states and all these other adversaries that are figuring out ways to go unnoticed. Like, they do every day it goes by that their attack is not noticed. They just have their feet up, and information just keeps coming in. And if we spend, the example we always use is taxpayers. Taxpayers pay for our innovation of our ships, our tanks, our technology, everything to keep China and Russia from bombing us or whatever. So, or when the droids start flying through the sky, right? We got to stop all that stuff.
Right.
So
I've seen The Matrix. I get it.
Yeah, I just rewatched. It was like a month ago.
It's been so long. I gotta watch
it makes
that.
me feel it's a totally different movie.
We should watch it.
I know. Controversial take. The second one might be my favorite.
Well, how about when I'm done? I was like, what I'm going to do, since it's 2021, I'm going to read people's opinions on what really is going on. Blew my mind. It was crazy.
Wow.
So, but yes, we want to stop the Matrix from happening, for the machines taking over. So the point is that we sit here as taxpayers.
This is deep.
It is. I'm going to hit some heartstrings here. All right. I'm going to hit people where it matters.
I didn't bring any tissues in here.
It's okay.
All right.
Here, we got some.
I'll just use my shirt.
That's fine.
Yeah,
it's a nice shirt. So
thank you.
They I don't remember, fuchsia or whatever we said.
It is. Yeah. We're not sure what color my shirt is today.
So taxpayers pay for a lot, innovation stuff. And so these contractors, there's grants, there's money. We spend billions of dollars making the coolest stuff in the world, right? And then China and Russia and others just take it from us. And there's a really big example of this. It's a couple years old, where a classified Navy submarine project, millions and millions and billions of dollars, was going to shoot a missile out of the water, and it was going to go up in the air and then attack the surface. That's pretty cool stuff.
That is cool.
Stuff you did in the bathtub when you were a kid with your toys.
Correct.
This is never going to happen.
That's
right.
So a smaller company, actually down the street from one of our clients, got breached. I don't remember the numbers, 1.8 terabytes of information of this project. Classified project, by the way. Yeah. So out the door. So now, not only do we just spend billions of dollars to develop this sweet missile system, we now have it in our enemies' hands, and now we get to spend more money defending against something we built. That should piss people off.
And now we went from the Matrix straight to Iron Man.
Yes.
Which is fun. I know.
Well, we need RoboCops. That's
RoboCops
the solution.
would be great. I know.
Just guys with smeared faces, and anyway. So it's it's the mission. It's the same thing. Man and I were talking about this before we came on. Is food. I would just go back. The most simplest thing you can think about to get people's minds to change is food.
Right.
Restaurants don't just get to do what they want. Right. They just don't. And everybody would be a chef if you could do that.
Manufacturing companies,
everything.
Food,
everything's regulated.
Distributors.
Yep. Beer. Everything's regulated. Right. You can't just do what you want. So why would we not treat cybersecurity and IT the same way, where it's like, I don't just, I go to a restaurant, I trust that the burger or whatever I'm eating is not going to make me die or sick or whatever.
Yes.
Well, it should be the same way. It should be the same way when you open up a computer and you do things, but it doesn't just happen. So it's not if it was regulated to the point where it needs to be, then yes, we should be able to operate. And when the robots come, we should be able to take them out.
Isn't this interesting though, that it's taken, how many years that the internet's been around,
and there's
been no regulation. Like I read an article recently that said, the internet was not built to last. Essentially, there was no governing body, there were no rules, there's no regulations. You can go back and delete information, you can modify it, all of this, where it was just because I was reading up for some of this, and they said it's made to, we're just putting information out there, misinformation.
But at the same time, it's understandable, right? I mean, we've only had this technological age for 130 years, 140 years ago. We were all running around in horse and buggy.
Yeah.
So I mean, so this is all new. We're trying to figure out what to do. Don't want too much government oversight, but need some rules to play. Obviously,
well, because normally you don't like, I don't like a lot of government oversight, right? But the internet has literally woven into every piece of our lives and controls our companies, our government.
Think about how it started, though. This is my favorite
Al
exercise when I present. Well,
not Al Gore.
Well, if he wants to take credit for how he invented it, then he should take credit for why he didn't do the stuff in the front.
Correct.
Think about every single person was raised the same way on the internet. I don't care how old you are. Well, back in the day when it started. So it was, first off, it was, wait, hold on. I can click this sentence or whatever with this blue line under it and go right to where I want to go on a computer. This is awesome.
It is awesome.
So then he did that, and I was like, oh, okay, that's cool.
Anyone remember like the sound of the dial-up?
Of course.
Dude,
right?
It was where you're just praying, crossing your fingers, like, go through.
Right.
Hey.
Yeah, and so then it was like,
or you wanted your brother to get off the damn phone so you could get on the internet. Exactly.
It was like, Mom!
Seriously.
Damn it.
Mom, tell him to get off.
She was just going to ask my age, sex, location.
Totally.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So,
I know.
So,
oh my God.
So then think about the
47-year-old
do you remember
dude
the
in
first
Chicago.
time something asked you for your username? Not screen name or whatever it was called for Instant, but like the first time you had to have a username, you're like, why?
Yeah.
Like, because we want to know that it's like Amanda or Jeremy or Derek. I was like, okay, I guess I can kind of get that. It's fine. And then all of a sudden they wanted a password.
Right.
Like, why? I just told you who I am because I have a username. Duh, and it's mine. I was like, okay, password. And it was back then it was, I don't even remember, like 4 letters probably or something.
It was small. Yeah,
so you did your pet's name, you did whatever, your address or whatever. Then it was like, I had to put a special character in there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, numbers were first.
Numbers first. So like a pin.
Or maybe it was capital letter because it was all lowercase was fine. Then you had to have a capital letter.
Yep. And
then you had to have a number.
Yep.
And now we've gone so far with this that I'm like 100% reliant on Google saving all of these things. So you get into my Google, you have all of it.
Yeah. And so, but then something like multi-factor authentication, which should be called something else. It should be called like burger bun or something so that people aren't scared by it.
Right. It sounds fancy.
It takes a quarter of a second longer and people are just like, nope, not doing it. It's like the commercial where don't be your parents. Like, we're going to open a PDF and they just leave the room.
Yeah.
It's like, this is literally, it comes up on your phone and you push, yes, it's me and not China.
Right.
And you get into your stuff.
Right.
Like, that's way easier to do.
However,
than putting a character at the end of it.
Can we all agree that clicking on the stupid pictures of which one has the red light in it? I don't. Oh my God.
I had the best moment. Well, because it overlaps into other squares. So did you also click on that square?
I know.
Or like,
I know.
I failed.
What if you're from another country where they don't have bikes? And you're like, what's a bike?
Right.
Or
I think it's that thing over there. And then it's over.
But it's just, there was a meme or a joke out there about like filling it out and failing it. And then you go, am I a robot?
Right. Right.
I don't know. You know what? I don't know. We would nerd out for a second here.
Sure,
that's
feel
unrelated. So I'm watching the Marvel series Loki.
Oh, I just started that.
So my kids and I would nerd out on this stuff. I mean, so is my wife. So we nerd out hard on this stuff. And one of the episodes, this is not a spoiler for people who haven't seen it.
It's okay. I won't watch it. Go ahead.
Good. They put him through a scanner just to make sure that you're not, when you go to this place, that you're not a robot. He's like, do people not realize they're robots? And then right when he gets to it, he's like,
what happens if I am?
Right.
And the guy goes,
the Matrix.
You'll melt.
That's the thing.
You'll melt from the inside out. And he was like,
I don't think this is worth it. Right.
Now, if you had to do that before you logged into a secure system for your business, think how the world would be different.
Right.
It's like, am I a robot?
I don't know.
What if it burns me if I'm a robot? If I melt? Whatever. So
it was a funny moment.
But also, like, I run a small business, right? So a lot of these huge things are like, they're on my radar, but they're not my present concern, right? So it's something that I'm hoping to get to, but you have to be willing to invest the money, hoping that you won't have a problem and that it's worth it. So there's there's an insurance component to it, for lack of a better word, where it's like, okay, how much is my car worth? If I wreck, how much insurance do I need? So, you know what I mean? So, like, I had an experience when I moved into my place and I wanted to get insurance, and I went to Geico's website, the old 15 minutes to save you 15%. There, if you don't know what you're doing, they give you like $8,000 worth of insurance. Like you have to understand what you're doing to say like, no, I have a nicer car than this. No, I would like insurance on the uninsured driver.
Exactly.
No, like you have to
That's
know
how
what
they
you're
get
doing. So like, and I'm not saying that, buying IT services for your company is exactly the same, but you have to understand what you could lose in order to understand why the investment makes sense, right? And I'm presuming with small businesses, that's half the battle,
Well,
right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So as a different example of this, so my ex, Eric, so who Derek also knows, actually who both of you know, he used to work for Ecolab. And so he was a bug killer for many years. And he said, people would kind of cancel services because they had no bugs. And he was like, that just means we're doing our job.
Right.
Like you don't want the bugs. You don't want the mice.
Right.
And so like this would be the same thing of like, well, no, you have to keep paying for,
You have to assume that you will have the need.
We've never been breached, so we're good.
Yeah, no breach means it's working. Don't cancel it. Stay on it.
And then you have Target, who loses it, right? And then one of our clients here, had a breach, and naturally the CISO loses their job, right? So
except with Target, the CISO got like a $40 million buyout for screwing whatever. Yeah. We'll look past that. And then each other biggest year ever.
I know.
Maybe they started COVID.
Oh my God, they did. I know.
Them and Microsoft got together, so we could do it. Everyone goes home.
Gotta watch
Shops
those.
on Amazon got in on it. Anyway, yeah, no, it
I
is.
could totally see Amazon.
Cybersecurity is
Good for Bezos.
so yeah, no kidding. Well,
now he's going to space.
I know, and he and Gates both got divorced. Maybe that was part of the plan too.
Yeah,
Are they going to
Take
rendezvous
over the
together?
world.
that's weird.
Go together to space, start on Mars with Amazon.
Start with the moon.
Amazon Soft. Put them together.
Amasoft.
Amasoft.
It sounds like Am-I-Soft.
Microzon.
Am-I-Soft?
I like Microzon.
Microzon
better.
sounds
Microzon's
way
better.
more
That's pretty legit.
futuristic. I like that. We should figure that out. Write that down.
Write that down.
Yeah, no, cybersecurity is absolutely, and IT is this way too. But we have grown as an economy, as a world, I guess, on IT services. But you never hired outside, right? With IT when it first started, it was internal. That was it. And then it was the idea of outsourcing to a managed service provider. Are you crazy? Then that is more common. And then it was cloud. And then you see the commercials with actual clouds on TV as if it's just floating, which it kind of is. But like just, it's easier because I don't have to have it here. So that's awesome. It's the same progression that everybody went through. So nobody wants to do it. It's the same thing. I mean, I've worked at different cyber firms in the past where it's you call somebody up and they say, we're good. I say, cool, tell me about that. Why are you good? We've never had a breach, and our IT company handles it for us.
Well, and I think it's because...
What happens when you do? Well,
it's too new.
Cyber insurance.
It's too new, right? So years and years ago, you had the mainframe computers where everybody was tapping in with just terminals. And then we started getting out of that with let's just call it PCs, and whether it's done, whatever. And then we moved our way to a bajillion servers. And then eventually we came around and said, this isn't working. There's too much hardware that's too local. Let's put it in the cloud. So basically the cloud is just mainframe 2.0, which is just external, essentially. It's elsewhere and it's always accessible. I just don't think security has gone through those waves yet, right? And I've been in staffing long enough to see the Fortune 500 companies do let's move it to India. And they signed a 5-year agreement with Tatas and the whatever companies of the world that can support that. And then they end up bringing it back. And why do they bring it back? It's because either they lose service and their employees experience that or lose control. And then they end up bringing it back in-house. And I think there's been enough of those cycles, for lack of a better word, and security hasn't gone through enough of those yet. But the growing pains seem to be
It feels like it's picking up speed.
It's very much a you get what you pay for industry still on IT. It can be. You can argue that with IT and security, specifically security, because they can't touch it and feel it, right? You can't walk into a room full of a bunch of executives at a big or small company and say,
it's intangible.
Here's what we're going to sell you on cybersecurity and information security services. They're going to be like, cool. But if you walk, and we've had clients say this. We've had CFOs say, I could walk into that room and tell them I need a $500,000 server and they'll buy it today. I don't have to tell them why. But if I say I need a $30,000 assessment on our organization to figure out where the hell we should even spend our money, they'll laugh and kick me out of the room. And
Isn't that
that's
messed
a problem.
up?
It's a problem. Now, nobody likes I'm going to use the car example because you touched on this. So there are grants available, especially the CARES Act, some of these other things. There are grants available to help companies become more secure, and that will continue to happen. The problem is they just throw money around. So they say, hey, Jeremy, here's money for your cybersecurity. And they give you, let's just make up a number and say it's $20,000. How much are you going to spend on your cybersecurity?
As little as
possible. About $21,000, right? Not you, but it's the same as your car. If the government gave you $10,000 a year to take care of your car, which drives you around and your kids and keeps you safe, and you trust that because you're driving it, you're going to go to the mechanic and you're going to ask them for a quote for, just like insurance, $11,000 a year. But if you read through all of the limited warranties or extended warranties, and stuff on cars, it literally, my brother-in-law ran into this. You have to do that stuff exactly like they say. Otherwise, they don't do it. And things like your timing, all these things can fall apart and your car could literally, a wheel could fall off and they won't cover you because they'll say you didn't get your oil change done every 3,000 miles. You didn't get your filter changed. And you could say, well, the guy at the place told me I didn't need my filter changed. It's like, well, he's not the expert. He's a mechanic. Just we run into that stuff.
But there are rules.
Yeah. So then people don't want to do it. And it's the same thing. I'm guilty of that. I don't take my car. My kid's going to drive my car, so I'm not taking care of that thing like I want it to run like anyway. So it's just an example of it is that the shortage then becomes with our expertise. I think back to this whole thing is having the experience in the IT is very critical, but it's not everything. I mean, IT and just security should be able to work together. They have to. It's a balance beam. It's a teeter-totter at the playground where security should be able to come up with what we need to do, what we need to comply with, ideas around that, and then the technical side should be infrastructure based. Okay, can we do this internally? Should we outsource this stuff?
And I think we're getting smarter. DevOps of the world, for example. A lot of people get confused by it because it's not a technology. It's the idea to get the development teams and the operation teams that are keeping things moving on the same page. Because if you develop things that your company is going to run, it needs to be supported by the operations, whether it be the infrastructure IT side or whatever that is. So the idea is can we just talk about this together before we build it in the first place? I think companies are starting to get that. We're starting to hear a little bit about that. So it used to be just CIO guy. And now it's CIO guy with the CISO. So this Chief Information Security Officer. Now we have a large organization, Fortune 500 company who just put in a BISO, the Business Information Security Officer. So they basically are saying, okay, we need to even split the security into two different worlds. So like what on the business side of our operations is there, let's just call it risk, right? And then on the security, AKA IT side, the actual tools, software, et cetera, that are supporting this, where are the gaps there? So, but it sucks. It sucks to have to plan, just like your damn car warranty. You go buy a car, now you don't even haggle on price. They send you to the warranty guy who shows you that one example out of 8 million where somebody's car died like the second it hit the first red light. Yeah. And then so how does your firm, and if you want to give specifics, fine, but just in general, how do you guys deal with the fact that you're not selling doom and gloom, but you have to be like, if we don't do this properly, this is what could happen. So I would assume the argument is, can we spend $30,000 to avoid 3 million? Is it that simple, or how do you guys go about it?
Well, it depends on what do you. So you hear the term risk assessment, right? So risk is making decisions based on likelihood and impact, and you can definitely get into really good dialogue with CISO. So let's go back 5, 6, 7 years. There was no CISO. Right. You weren't talking to a C-level person. If a breach happened at a company 6, 7, 8 years ago, the IT person was fired. Yes. So that's all changed now, even across the Department of Defense and the stuff that we spent a lot of time in.
Right. Some Cisco firewall guy takes the blame.
Yep. They point fingers somewhere else. And from a CEO down standpoint, it was someone else's fault. Well, now in our industry right now that we're spending a lot of time in with the Department of Defense, policy and procedural documentation has to be signed off by organizational leadership. That's a big difference. So that means that the person signing that document from a leadership standpoint is saying, I agree that this process and procedure for my company is going to make us more secure. Like, we do this because we identified that, and now we're doing this, and this is in place, And if Amanda takes off, then we know that we've got it, blah, blah, blah. So that's
everybody loves process. Just can't get enough.
I really do appreciate it more than I used to. But I know.
Well, you do now.
Yeah, I do.
Right.
Nobody really likes it because I just
running my own company. I get that too.
Yeah, you once you understand the impact of it and why it's important, you actually do kind of get addicted to it, which is kind of weird. But so that is the maturation of where things are going. It is a process maturity, which is thrown around a lot too. Is we have leadership buy-in now. The only reason leadership really gets involved now is that they either hired somebody, like you said, that's their job, or they see it in the news and they don't want to be in the news. But there's a lot of examples of breaches that we never hear about, where a breach can happen and not be impactful to your business. Like if I get into certain information, but I get stopped there. We have a sister company called Red Team Security here in St. Paul.
Oh, very familiar.
Yeah, so you pay them when you're proud of where you're at. You don't really want to pay somebody to beat China and Russia, or even the hacker at Caribou or Starbucks to see how bad they can do, because if you aren't mature and you don't know, then it's over. So the point is, it becomes very you have to know. You don't know what you don't know. That's where it comes down to. Those conversations are important, but for our business, it is about, yes, we will get into. We are not scared to say, you guys have a massive exposure right here because of this stuff. You are at risk, and you can't put an overall dollar amount, but you can ask questions like, how much would that really cost if half of your client base decided to take off because you just let their stuff run away? Well, then you start figuring, well, you know what would stop that? This, and this, and that will cost you X amount of dollars. That's totally worth implementing because it saves you a ton of money. And you know what? If you want to test that to make sure, you hire another company to come in and show you exactly how they got in, and you fix that stuff and they test it for free and show you that, you know what, if an attacker uses that approach, which is a very common approach, you stop it. That's like the same thing. It's process showing that's working. That stuff's key. And we do a lot of that. That's where we get into the weeds, if you will, with everybody, IT and leadership.
Don't overthink it. Hypothetically, is there like a recommended annual, biannual, quarterly assessment that you'd recommend?
Another depends. If you are very immature and haven't done a lot, then you need a stake in the ground right now where you are before you can plan anything.
Makes sense.
The worst thing that people do right now is they make strategic plans based off information they don't understand. They just kind of throw shit against the wall, right, and then see what sticks. That doesn't work anymore. Periodic assessments and accountability around auditing and stuff is super, super important. From your technology to your apps to parts of your business, some divisions handle way more serious stuff than others. They should have some more accountability and stuff around them versus more basic information. So we're big fans of whether you're doing vulnerability assessments and scans, you should be doing those regularly, right? And then, but for sure, every year, I mean, NIST says this in the early days of the NIST Bible, is at least annually you're doing assessments of your stuff. That was a long time ago. Things are way more drastic now. That should be more frequent. So we have people doing quarterly reviews, and we've got people doing annuals, and depends.
Just to tie this real kind of back for some of our listeners that are probably in IT, potentially in security. So I have two kind of last questions for you. Of what advice do you have for security professionals kind of deciding between two paths of working, of like a company like you or going internal? Like, is there a big difference in that path? And maybe you don't know, again, you're kind of from the marketing side of it, but that was something that I was just wondering of, like, kind of, do they go down a path? Yeah.
So if I were in a security role myself, like one of our employees or one of our customers that has these roles, the biggest thing you're going to get if you want to be successful in a security role, just like in IT, is support. So you can ask questions on the front end during interviews or when you're checking people out on where do they want to get to? Why are they doing it? That's the biggest first question we always ask. Why are we here? Are we here because you need to comply with something because someone just told you, or you're being proactive because you want to like make a bunch of money doing something and show that you're compliant? Or are we here because something bad happened and now you're just reacting to it? And if you work for a company, let's say you're interviewing somewhere and you want to get into security, and it's a really good role. It's a very satisfying role if you can get into a company an organization, I should say, that is very driven to not be a problem to their customers. I would say that you don't want to go somewhere where it's, let's say, egos are a big problem. There's a lot of egos in IT and security. So if somebody is really bought into and you ask the right questions on, we want a security role because we want that balance, great company to work for. But what's their outcome? Do they want to be compliant or do they want to be secure? There's two different things. Do they want to be tech savvy or do they want to be throwing a bunch of stuff around and spending a bunch of money on things that you're just going to be overwhelmed with, and then it's going to come back on you? Because that's a big, if they're hiring a security officer for the first time or a security role for the first time, it's going to be new to them. So having that internal buy-in is a huge, huge deal. And I think there's 5 easy questions you can ask people and get an idea how that company really feels. Because if they're motivated by the wrong things, it's probably not going to be a good outcome.
Okay.
Oh, 5 easy questions.
I know.
I don't have them written down, but
I hope even if you did, don't spill them now.
I do have some good ones. I'm not going to spoil it.
Yeah.
Check the show notes for Derek's contact information.
How much do you pay? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's right.
That's not a good question.
So kind of on that then, and this is partly because I'm curious too, of like, let's say I'm a company, I own a company. How do I decide between using a company like yours or hiring a team internally, or do I need both?
Both.
You do?
So self-assessing is always good. Doesn't matter what you're doing. Doesn't matter what industry. Doesn't matter what kind of company you are. You should always be self-assessing against risk to your business. If you don't have enough resources to do certain things, you either have a risk or you have a decision, which means you got to go outsource it, right? So from an IT and security standpoint. But third-party reviews and expertise is a big deal. So there are a lot of people who say they're experts in certain things, specifically in our industry. Everybody stays in a Holiday Inn Express last night and became an expert in security because they took a class online for free on YouTube. But it's like
That's great.
Anybody can ask you questions. This is a huge challenge in our industry. We need, let's say you need to comply with a certain framework. Anybody can ask you the questions. Do you have this? Yes or no? And you have gaps. If your answer is no, then you have a gap.
Yeah.
Well, the answer might be yes, but, or yes and, or no but. So do you have somebody with an infrastructure background who that report, that deliverable that you're giving them is, you have the ability to fix some of this stuff because here's why. That's the level of expertise that you need. That third party opinion of, we have no skin in this game outside of making sure this stuff gets into place.
That's a big deal.
That's our mission.
I could see that.
We don't care if people save money.
As a security person, you don't want to be like, hi, I have big gaps. And
well, what's great about this too is like starting a small business. I did all that on my own, just basic stuff.
Yeah,
and then
once
I got over tax, let's call it that, I started using a third party vendor to help me out with those things. But having a third party separate from them to give the assessment, take that information and say, here's what needs to be fixed. Can I get a quote on this? Makes sense, right? Because now you're not making yourself susceptible to random recommendations.
Yeah, what good is an assessment if you're not going to move that stake forward? And there's a lot of people who say they'll help you do that, but then they don't want to make a comment on who you should use. Well, it's like, We're different in that from a lot of firms where if Amanda has an awesome company, it's security or a product, and Jeremy has an awesome product and they can solve the problem for our customer, why would we not say, you know what, we can't do it for you because we are your third party, so we can't manage this for you and do it for you. But you know what? Talk to Amanda's company because they solve a problem. Talk to Jeremy's company, they solve a problem, and let's talk about it. If you don't get a good feel or you maybe went to their competition, okay, then that's what that third party should be doing, is getting this stuff into place. And then you can show it, right? And then that's where the question on how often do you assess? Do an annual assessment. Go against the gaps you just filled over the last quarter. Start paying attention to the work that you're making, because to answer your question, Amanda, about if you're going to take a security role on, you want to show progress. Because if you do it right, you shouldn't be having outside outsourced consultants forever necessarily. If they're not helping you move it forward, then they're not really doing their job. That's what you pay them for. It's like a lawyer, right? A lot of people don't want to use a lawyer until they have to, but if you have a good relationship with a lawyer or a CPA firm on stuff, like, they can help you do the right thing, but it's up to you to do it. And if something bad happens, then you have a relationship that doesn't gouge you, or you have people that are like, don't do that, because that's not really going to be the first place you should spend your time.
Well, I like your talk track just specifically because what you're, let's just call it recommending post-assessment is not loaded with, now we can sell you something else.
Yeah, or a
Right.
reseller of Cisco, or I'm not to pick on Cisco,
Right.
or Amazon or
Of
Microsoft.
course.
We'll sell you all this stuff. We can fix everything for you. Managed service providers were doing that for a while. They were doing assessments on technology they manage,
Sure.
right?
And then offering their services.
And then guess what? For another couple $100 or $1,000 per month, we'll fix all this stuff for you. It's like, well, that's okay. To your point, Jeremy.
It's like a little gray.
Yeah. Who is holding them accountable? to
Right.
this? I'm not saying it's a bad
Objection leading the
Because you have to
witness.
trust them because you don't know, right? 'Cause
Yeah, and
you have
you
to
need
trust
to know.
them.
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, I'm going to trust that this is right, but it's all through you. So is this just like
It's the whole
fatten it up?
you
like,
need to you got to stop believing, you got to start knowing type of stuff. It's the trust versus verify, which I was just pointed out by a friend of mine the other day and I have not looked this up yet, even though he said you can. Trust versus verify is the whole process in security right now, which is don't just trust it, verify it, right? Apparently that was a Russian term that Reagan used against them during the whole, So,
Really?
Yes. So I
don't know.
Look, we're going to look it up. There's homework for everybody. That's
Okay, trust but verify.
which is pretty cool.
I'm sure
Like,
there's there's somebody out there too that disagrees with the notion that you can't have one firm doing assessments and implementing the solution.
Sure. Yeah.
And I get that logic, right? It doesn't mean that everybody is jaded and it just constantly coming up with ideas of issues to sell more product, but having a separate solution of the two makes sense.
Or at periodic of reviews from an outside, say, fine,
Right.
if you believe that, then have somebody else come in who does not have to gouge you and just say, show me, tell me everything every year. Just say,
Right.
you're right. You can do all this work. It's
Trust
just no different than
but
if
verify.
Jeremy was the only person that worked for the company, absolutely is capable of doing security and IT if they want to. It's a heavy burden because if Jeremy missed something or a new attack comes up or a new update comes up from Microsoft or something and Jeremy doesn't get to it in time because he's stressed out and thinned out, okay, so then maybe that's not the best path. All that kind of stuff is important. You have to know that stuff.
After a quick Google search,
Mm.
you are correct. Suzanne Massey, an American scholar, met with President Ronald Reagan many times between 84 and 87, and she taught him the Russian proverb Doverai. I don't know how to say that. Doverai no proverai. Essentially, trust but verify. And he said, I like it.
See? No, I'm not taking credit for that because someone told me that, but
Wow.
that is that's blog content right there. I'm going to use that.
That's pretty impressive.
That's good.
I'm proud of you.
Yeah, don't release this podcast until I have
Not
that
yet?
blog written.
All right, intellectual property.
Because Amanda's probably
I didn't
Russian
sign a
spy.
waiver, man.
She's
We
like,
can use all of this. I know.
yeah, she's on to us.
No, that's awesome. Hey, thank you very much. This was awesome. I mean, we could just keep talking about this all day, which
Seriously?
might mean that we have to have you come back again because it'd be fun to dive into like the three basic categories, right? Because that's what I've always been keyed in on for security, right? So you got governance, risk, and compliance. You have identity and access management, and then you have the threat and vulnerability management. And there's a lot of meat there. Just like you said, there's a lot of analysts, which I'm using that term generically, that are on, let's just call it the processes, procedures, assessment side. And there's a lot of engineer, architect level stuff that people are doing that's really, really cool.
Yep.
So there's a lot of stuff there that's an amazing career path. I think the biggest challenge for those out there listening is if you're not doing it, it's tough, right? Like you have to have the experience to be in this field. This is not really an area that any sized organization is just going to trust you to do. So what I've seen done best is if you want to get into this field, if you're on the analyst side, and I use that generically, try and utilize your skills in that area to merge into that skill set. So if you're a technical analyst, a business analyst, a project manager, whatever you want to call it, you can start keying in on those projects as a PM, as a BA to be able to meld into that arena. If you're a systems administrator, if you're doing desktop support, start volunteering to do those things, whether it be setting up IDs and moving into the user administration area, which is just a general part of IAM, which is identity and access management. Or maybe you're on the network side and you've been CCNA, CCNP, network support, network engineer guy. Well, start focusing on the firewall related area because that stuff's not going away. So technology always merges. So, essentially the idea is to stay sharp, but this particular skill set is not going away. It's very recession proof. Pay rates are really, really high. And it's always in demand. I mean, that was literally an area that my organization as a staffing IT firm leaned on in COVID, knowing that if there's any area, regardless of worldwide flippin' pandemics, companies are going to spend money on, it's going to be security, right? So they can scrap development projects. They can throw out the idea of upgrading this or rolling out that, but keeping the company secure, especially for big organizations, is a big deal. Okay, awesome interview with Derek. That was really, really cool. Super fun guy. Very thankful to him. As promised, we'll put his information, LinkedIn profiles, etc. in the show notes as well. Feel free to reach out to him about anything. And as promised, we're going to come back with another security-related topic here in the very near future. We're hoping to have a booked guest as well. And we thank you for your time, and we'll see you again on the next episode of the Hire Fire podcast. Thank you for listening to the Hire and Fire podcast, brought to you by Pirate Consulting. Please check us out online via LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or at our website, pirateconsulting.com. That's PIRA consulting.com.